name is Ellen Greenwood, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and it is my privilege to be the worship associate for our service this morning. And it's also my privilege to welcome you to Westside Unitarian Universalist Church. Westside is a congregation that welcomes each person, each and every one of us, who comes into this community with an open heart and an open mind, regardless of the path you may take to get here. And you are also most welcome regardless of what manner you have chosen to be here. We welcome you if you're here in person, and we would give an especially warm welcome to those of you who are joining us through the magic of YouTube, either right now or at some time in the future. Before we get to the heart of our service, we do, as always, have a few announcements. First of all, we have our potluck today, our first of the month potluck, and I know we have lots of food. If you are new to us, or just sometimes you get up on Sunday and forget, if you don't have a dish with you, we would love to have you stay for conversation and good food, but I hope everyone will stay for that. And if you can't stay for the potluck, we also have coffee and conversation immediately following the service, so please stay for that. Also, we have some important dates coming up very shortly. Next Sunday, August 9th, is the cluster picnic. This will be a picnic for all 4 UU churches in our area, and it is at the Cove at Concord from 4 to 8 p.m. And it's right by the water. There's, I think, there used to be, I don't know if they're on Sunday. Sometimes there are boats you can rent. There are always geese. And it's very beautiful, and we'll have lots of fun and good fellowship with other UUs. And you can register for that in the newsletter. Reverend Carroll says it's good to register if you can, but you can show up even if you're not registered. Then we also, our Spirit Quest retreat will be September 18th through 20th, that weekend, and it is at Elkmont Campground in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. There are fire circles and shared meals and times for reflection. You can camp at Elkmont or find a cabin outside the park in the Townsend area, and it should be a wonderful time if you would like to do that weekend in September. Then October 23rd through 25th at Rock Island State Park is our all-church retreat, and this is always fun for all of us. It's a time to be together in the woods, away from all the things that pull us in different directions, and just be together and enjoy that beautiful place. So it would be good if you registered for either of those events that you're interested in, or both, and those registrations are in the email newsletter. And I need to make an announcement that I did not get to Brad in quite enough time to make the order of service today, but you'll be seeing this in the newsletter. Some of you, at least the ones who were signed up, know that my husband and I had to postpone an auction event that we offered at the last auction, which is a dinner here at Westside accompanied by music from the Tanassi Winds Woodwind Quintet, which features, among other people, my husband on clarinet. But they will entertain us while we eat with sort of light classical, and you don't know what they might show up with music, but it's always fun, I think, you know. And then I'll provide the meal. We have places available, $20 a person. So if you're already signed up, you should have gotten an email from me. But if you are not signed up and would like to come, let me know, and we'd love to have you. Also, since we put this together, we've added a very nice feature. As we gather, we'll start gathering at 6 o'clock and have dinner at 6:30. But from 6 to 6:30, we'll have more music provided by David Shoemaker, who wore the perfect shirt this morning. You need to wear that shirt on August 30th, and also Judy Winchester. So should be a fun evening. August 30th, Saturday. All right. I think we're ready to invite the singing bowl.
And to move the microphone. August 30th is a Sunday. Yes, it's Sunday the 30th or Saturday the 29th?
Oh, let's do Saturday the 29th.
Saturday the 29th, she says.
Dates, I have to have it.
There you go. I was sitting there thinking, I think the 30th is a Sunday, but okay. So, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I love that you've all gotten so good at saying good morning, like a good classroom or something. It's sort of, it's wonderful. It's great to see you all. I am Reverend Carol Bodeau. I am privileged to serve here as minister. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm really happy to be with you this morning. I want to say a special good morning to those with us virtually. I do have one more announcement that I want to make that I didn't tell Ellen. There's one more announcement that's sort of a sad but sweet announcement for our congregation, which some of you already know. Brad Kurtz, who has been for 13 years, our office manager, is resigning his position and will be leaving us. Brad has been in training to become a certified therapist and is finishing his internship and graduating in just a couple weeks, and is going to be going full-time into practice in that new career. Next Sunday will be Brad's last Sunday here. And he has told us that he does not want a party, no way, no how. Okay? Yeah, I said that too, Morgan. So, and he's been sneaking out early. So I want to tell you, he's in the office right now. That's why I'm telling you this now. If you want to get a chance to say goodbye to Brad, this Sunday or next Sunday is your last chance, because starting on the 16th, he will no longer be here with us at Westside. The board is working hard on figuring out what to do next. We first want to just say a big thank you to Lily. Woo! Brad has been training a few people to handle our Sunday morning live streaming, and we're working on other aspects of the job, but Brad's job is monumental, enormous, and going to be really, 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 really hard to fill. So,
can you list all the things that he does?
Not in one sermon. Not a chance. There's no way I can list all the things he does. Brad has provided us with like a 13-page document of the things we're going to need to figure out. So please take a moment when you get a chance to thank him. Brad has been serving in that position longer than I have been here, and I am finishing my 12th year right now. So please take a moment to thank him when you get a chance. That means we're gonna have some disruptions and all kinds of things probably. So please be patient as we have a transition team that is already in place, working to try to strategize and figure out what to do next. But there will be some disruptions in various functions as we try to get people in place to make sure emails get answered and phones and all the various social media and live streaming and things like that. So a big thank you to Brad. So this morning, we're going to do a little waltz through some UU history and the history of some tensions in our denomination around different belief systems and different theological paths. So, we invite a Himalayan bowl to sing. And you can interpret that practice from a whole bunch of different angles. Some people just think of it as like a sound that makes you focus your attention. Other people think of it as a spiritual practice. I have in the past explained that for Himalayan peoples, particularly very traditional Himalayan peoples, the bowl actually is a spiritual presence. And when I invite the bowl to sing, I am actually speaking with and communicating with the presence or the spirit of the bowl. And so there are very different ways that we come into this room and we encounter one another and our basic core understandings of reality. So today we're going to be talking about how do we do that? How do we do that? So as I invite the bowl to sing this morning, I invite you to center yourself first just in this room and in this moment. Let's let go of all we brought in and open our minds and our hearts to the possibility of new ways of seeing.
Well, I chose words for our chalice lighting today from a song by Unitarian Universalist singer-songwriter Peter Mayer. You possibly have heard his name because he also is the composer of my favorite hymn, Blue Boat Home. And one of his other fairly well-known songs is called Holy Now. And I'm going to read just a portion of the lyrics to Holy Now. When I was a boy, each week on Sunday we would go to church, pay attention to the priest, and he would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today, the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. This morning I stood outside and I saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down. But I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. And each week, we light our candles to show our concern and also our joy in the world around us. Among the numerous tragedies and distressing bits of news that I heard this week, I was particularly sad yesterday to hear that we have had yet another shooting in Twin Falls, Idaho, where several people were killed and others wounded, and it sometimes is just overwhelming when, every week there is another shooting or act of violence. So we'll light a candle of concern for all the people who are suffering from violence, particularly these, especially from the shooting yesterday in Idaho. And in good news, there is actually, as some of you may know, a good news network, which we need, I think, of community, but maybe there's still some there, making these things happen, repairing a little bit since the time of our global pandemic. And here in our area, as another example of the way community works to help the issue of hunger, our Share the Plate, or Justice and Generosity, I should say, partner, Knox Pride, has become one of the primary food pantries and food sources for many people, particularly in South Knoxville. They reported this week that they have been receiving thousands of eggs every week and distributing all of these to the people who, I think I saw a few weeks ago that they are giving out 300 meals a day. It just, if you've been to their tiny little facility, it's amazing. But there is some good community work going on out there. And we especially celebrate and cherish and nurture this community, our community here at Westside. And I think we feel that most when someone in our midst is particularly going through a tough time. And we were all very saddened this week to learn of the passing of Barry Shumpert's husband, Pete. And I'm going in just a minute to light a candle for him, and Barry is going to come and just say a few words.
Some of you have met my husband, Peter Wilson. We were married in 2013, but had been together since 1999, so we've had quite a life together, a very good life. And he left us last Monday night, and I wanted to thank everybody who's reached out and provided good wishes and comfort to me. That's been very, very helpful, you can't imagine, and let you know I'm doing okay. It's just like a blanket of sadness and loss that lays over everything that happens, but I'm doing okay. And thank you all very much.
So, Barry, we are here no matter what. Whatever you need in the coming days and weeks, we're here. So we as a community handle loss and grief and challenge and confusion in different ways. We as individuals all have our own personal approaches to these things. And Unitarian Universalism asserts itself to be a place where we can do that regardless of differences of theology or perspective. That's sort of the core of this tradition, right? So we're going to be talking about that today, and we're going to start, I'm going to invite you to help us sing a song. Now, if you've been in UU congregations in the past, it's a song you will have heard. And if not, it's a lovely song, and I will tell you that it is met with very mixed responses in UU congregations, and we're going to talk about why. But I'm going to invite the choir to come stand up front. The words for the rest of you will be up here on the screen. Choir, if you could face them. But if you've been in UU congregations very long, you're going to recognize this song. And Lily's going to post the words for us to Spirit of Life. And I'm going to play it. And what we're going to do is we're going to sing it through twice. So we'll sing it once so that if you're unfamiliar with it, you'll get a chance to hear it. And you sing along with us whenever you feel ready. We will sing it through twice so that everybody gets a chance to try. So that song, Spirit of Life, is a real classic of Unitarian Universalism. It is sung at UU churches all over the world, and it is generally considered our most familiar and most UU of all hymns. It is either dearly beloved or deeply disliked, depending on your personal theological leanings. I can tell you that we've had people in our choir before who said, absolutely, we will never sing this, who did not like it, right? And I've been in lots of UU congregations, that many people do not like Spirit of Life. So we're going to talk a little bit about why that is and what it has to do with where Unitarian Universalism is right now. This song was written by Carolyn McDade in the late 1980s. And Carolyn McDade is quite a figure in our history, a composer, a musician, a poet. In a UU World article, so if you're not familiar, our denomination does have a magazine. It's called the UU World. In a 2007 article in that magazine, writer Kimberly French refers to Spirit of Life as our doxology, or perhaps our amazing grace. But though UUs have claimed Carolyn McDade for decades, she herself actually does not claim Unitarian Universalism. She describes herself instead as a woman of faith seeking with others to touch what matters. She most describes herself as an activist. She doesn't even call herself a musician or a poet or a lyricist. She calls herself an activist. The song is often used to articulate a sort of catalog of UU values, right? Because you hear compassion and justice, and the imagery is an environmental consciousness, but it was not intended to be necessarily used that way. It was not written to express UU values. It was written as a personal prayer. So here's the story, as relayed by Kimberly French in that UU World article. And then this, by the way, is repeated. There's a wonderful website y'all can check out if you're ever interested in any of the songs that we sing. There's a site called Notes from the Far Fringe. Reverend Kimberly DeBus has created this website where you can go look up any hymn and she'll tell you something about it, about its history or about how it's used, or it's not necessarily consistently the same kinds of information, but you can always check that out. So both places relay this story about the song Spirit of Life. When Carolyn McDade remembers most clearly, what Carolyn McDade remembers most clearly about writing this song was the feeling she had. When I got to my friend Pat's house, she says, I told her, I feel like a piece of dried cardboard that has lain in the attic for years. Just open wide the door and I'll be dust. I was tired, not with my community, but with the world. So my friend just sat with me, and I loved her for sitting with me. And the story continues. McDade then drove to her own home in Newtonville. I walked through my house, she says, in the dark, found my piano, and that was my prayer. May I not drop out. It was not written, but prayed. I knew more than anything that I wanted to continue in faith with the movement. As an activist, Carolyn McDade had been working for years on important social issues, particularly women's issues, and she was tired. She wasn't sure she could continue, so she was reaching out to something for strength to continue. Now, that's something she refers to in the song as the Spirit of Life. And therein lies one of the core conundrums that this hymn often presents to UU congregations. McDade herself, and this song in particular, are centered, as she says, in faith. It's a prayer, a spiritual plea to something greater. And that can be very tricky for UU congregations. We are a pluralistic tradition. Our congregations include people who are atheists and agnostics and Buddhists and Christians and Jews and Muslims and pagans and all sorts of other theological alignments. One of our taglines is, we need not think alike to love alike. And we proclaim that we welcome all who come with open hearts and open minds. And yet we can still find it difficult to make sense of others in our midst whose theological leanings are very different from our own. And I say that meaning all of us can find it difficult to make sense of any, it's not just that atheists don't understand mystics or mystics don't understand atheists, it's that Christians don't understand necessarily Buddhists, it's confusing. And yet we are a tradition that says we can all come together in spite of those differences. And UU congregations all over the world, and certainly here at Westside, this song has had a mixed reception due to its clearly mystical and spiritual origins and leanings. It's a prayer. And even that word can be triggering for some of us. The word faith can be triggering for some of us. Many of us find prayer absolutely incomprehensible, and others of us find it absolutely essential. So that's a conundrum for us. What do we do with that? When Westside was founded in the 1980s, UUism had been, for a few decades, centered in a cultural movement that is referred to as secular humanism. Okay? It's a specific kind of branch or version of the general humanist movement. Secular humanism focuses on human reason, logic, and secular ethics while rejecting religious dogma, supernaturalism, and superstition as the basis for morality and decision-making. Secular humanism in our own traditions, this denomination's tradition, was really central in the early 20th century. But we're going to back up a minute before that to just do a little history review for the sake of context. So Unitarianism and Universalism were both born of the same very old, long time ago religious movement, the Reformation. So think about what you know about Luther and Calvin and those people, right? We're talking about the Reformation, the 1500s. Now, at that time, there's a branch of the Reformation called the Radical Reformation. That would be us, okay? The Radical Reformation had all these little side heresies, okay? And I will tell you this, even as recently as when I was in seminary, not that long ago, there were individuals in in the eastern part of Europe who were still being martyred for holding Unitarian and Universalist beliefs. Okay, I met a minister from that part of the world whose father had been murdered for being a Unitarian. This is still true in the Philippines. It is still very dangerous to be a Unitarian Universalist in the Philippines. So at that time, at the time of the Reformation, there was this radical branch. And most of those people, a lot of them actually went and hid out in what is now Poland. So this included a bunch of groups like the Mennonites, the Amish, the Universalists, and the Unitarians, and some others, right? So we come out of that tradition. Both the Unitarians and the Universalists come out of that tradition. Now the Unitarians, these are separate traditions, championed by people like William Ellery Channing and Ralph Waldo Emerson, were very much Christians until the mid-19th century. Okay? Now, here's the catch. We think that Unitarian and Universalist mean we love everybody. That is not what unity and universal meant at the beginning. The Unitarians simply believed that God was not a trinity. They were Unitarian, not Trinitarian. But they were Christian. And the Universalists, again, arising at the same time and kind of starting to grow in popularity around the 1700s, gaining strength in the 1800s, Universalists believed in universal salvation, which is to say they didn't believe in hell. They believed everybody went to heaven. Still Christians, explicitly Christian traditions. So the unity in Unitarian and the universal in Universalism did not mean religious plurality until the 20th century, the middle of the 20th century. It wasn't until the end of the 19th century that we started to get a more modern understanding of either of these religions as inclusive was beginning to happen. And I will be very clear, that was only the Unitarians. The Universalists remained staunchly Christian well into the 1970s and 80s, and many Universalist congregations today that are affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Association, there are Universalist congregations that are still explicitly Christian congregations. So, but in the 19th century, the Unitarians started broadening the perspective. They started adding other things, right? So think about the Transcendentalist movement, the development, the increasing inclusion of Eastern traditions. This happened in Unitarianism in the 19th century. By the early 20th century, there was this growing interest in this new humanist movement that had started. It had started earlier, but it was growing in the 19th century. So there was this branch of humanism that was becoming increasingly important in our tradition. And by the early 20th century, the secular humanist movement was extremely important in our denomination, particularly in the 20s and 30s and into the 40s. It continued to be a very important component of the denomination, which we now have When 1961 came, those two separate denominations merged. So our denomination is only that old. The Unitarian Universalist Association happened in 1961. But that caused some tension because the Universalists were still explicitly Christian. The Unitarians had started to broaden out their definition of theology. So, and some of you have heard me tell this story that when I was editing a book on Unitarian Universalist history for my little hometown, the elders who were still alive from the early Universalist church there refused to speak to me because I was Unitarian. Okay? Recently, Unitarian Universalism is seeing a new demographic trend, one that is evident here at Westside, but also throughout the world. Secular humanists, often people who consider themselves atheist or agnostic, but not necessarily, right, are still very much an important part of our social fabric and are still very much an important part of UU congregations. But here's the change that's happening: the internet. The internet happened. Now think about what the world was like 40 or 50 years ago. Before the internet and online communities and meetups, churches were if not the dominant locus of social connecting outside of the workplace. Think about that. If you wanted to build community, if you wanted to, it was your neighborhood maybe, or your job. But the place where people went to build connection was the church. Even if people were not particularly religious per se, the church was still a really important place to go to build community. So when I first came here 12 years ago, many of the founding people at Westside told me that one of the primary reasons they wanted this congregation to exist was that in East Tennessee, you needed to be able to tell people what church you belonged to. Like community, and to come together. So for a long time, Unitarian Universalism, that was one of its primary functions, was to provide a place for people who wanted social connection and cohesion, but who didn't want all the trappings of other religious faiths, right? But things changed. So one of the things that changed is people would go to UU churches for, one of the phrases I heard a lot was intellectual stimulation. Contemporary people do not need more intellectual stimulation. How many of us feel extremely intellectually overstimulated? I repeat, the internet. The internet. You don't need to go to church on Sunday to have somebody tell you what's happening in the world. You got plenty of access to that. And if you want to read, you can go as far down the rabbit hole as you want to go on any topic you can think of. So the church has ceased to be a primary locus for intellectual information and stimulation, right? In fact, people are coming to church because they need a break from that, to some extent. They're tired of it. They need something else, right? And the other thing is that if you are a young atheist or agnostic in East Tennessee now, church is probably not going to be your first choice because there are lots of other choices. Which does not mean, that does not in any way mean you're not welcome here if you're a 25-year-old atheist. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that the overall demographics are changing because our society is changing. Now, people most likely to seek a UU community are looking for something different. They are either looking for usually one of two things as the way to define their community. Okay? And those two things, and this is not me making this up, okay? There's tons of demographic studies. There have been tons of articles and things that have been being written for, decades in the denomination about this and in the world at large. But people coming to our congregations are looking for communities centered in justice. That is number one. And they are still looking for non-dogmatic communities, but now they're looking for spiritual experiences, which is a change. We used to be looking for places to talk about non-spirituality, and the much larger demographic now is people looking for places to talk about some kind of experience, something bigger, not defined in traditional conventional religious terms. So you could say that we went through as a denomination a long era of being very anti-church, and people are now looking for something that kind of feels more like a church than they were 30 years ago. This is absolutely true at Westside, okay? So we have an increasingly mystical denomination. Our congregants are increasingly a larger percentage. I use the blanket term mystics. You could use all kinds of other terms. When I started here 12 years ago, I would say that about 75 to 80% of Westsiders were atheist, agnostic, some version of secular humanist. 10 to 15% were part of a specific faith tradition, like Christianity or Judaism or something like that. And only a very small percentage would have identified themselves in any way as spiritual or mystical. Those numbers have reversed in our denomination and in our building. Now we have about 60% of our number here who describe themselves in some way as mystical, or having some ideas that what the secular humanists would call supernatural. And that has some of us very concerned. More than one person who here defines themselves as atheist or agnostic has in the last 6 months said to me words like shamanic, spiritual, energetic. Some people would use the word religious or godly. There are all kinds of words and as many perspectives as there are individuals. But here's probably the most general quality of mysticism, the way I would define it. It's the belief that something transcended, beyond what we can touch with our first 5 senses, exists and is in direct relationship with our lives. Something transcendent that is somewhat immaterial exists and is in relationship with our lives. Now, Carolyn McDade calls that the spirit of life. Often when I was a new UU minister and I had to lead a prayer in a mixed community, I would start with spirit of life and love and all that is sacred. Because there's nothing like being a UU minister to learn how to translate. Right? Because you've got a room full of people who speak 20 different languages theologically. She calls it spirit of life. Others would call it the God or the goddess or the divine. Peter Mayer refers to it as holiness, with which the world is imbued and separate from religious dogma, right? Others might call it energy or chi. Some might call it the force of the soul or the spirit. They might call it the essential self or the high self, which exists within but also beyond the material realm. There are so many ways to explain what it is that people are talking about when they talk about this something. Now, recently here, in the last year, we had a class called Building Your Own Theology, in which a group of about 20 of us got together and talked about our journeys. And I will tell you that I have led Building Your Own Theology about 5 or 6 times now as a UU minister in different congregations. And I've never seen such a high percentage of people in Building Your Own Theology describe their journeys as mystical ones, including mystical experiences. It showed me that we're having a demographic change, which I already knew was happening. And some of those experiences were described here in a recent worship service. And so we're seeing that also in discussion groups, and we're seeing that in all kinds of ways. And it raises this question for us. How do we feel about that, for starters? How do we feel about that? Some of us feel incredible relief. Some of us feel some distress and concern. And the question I have for us is this: why does the presence of that difference feel so threatening to us from either side of the aisle? What is it about mysticism or atheism or whatever else that makes us afraid or worried that we're not going to fit in anymore, that we're not going to belong, that we're not going to be included? When I was in seminary, we referred to this sort of general tension around mysticism. We referred to it as the new UU closet. Okay? You know, the old closet was being LGBTQ+. The new closet, when I was in seminary, was what a lot of earth-based people call the broom closet, where the witches hang out. And there's a lot of them, let me just say. I can think of a whole lot of people who've been in a whole lot of conversations here who would tell you that they have been in the broom closet at some point in their lives. This has been a place where people who have mystical experiences have felt that they had to hide their stories and their perspectives for fear of being told they were crazy, that they were unacceptable, that their views were just intellectually inferior, lacked logic, and were just crazy and unacceptable. We have had these conversations here many times at Westside. And they lived for a long time with that deep fear of rejection and not belonging. But now the demographics are changing. And now the numbers are changing. And now I'm hearing people who do not have those experiences fearing rejection, fearing not belonging, fearing that they will no longer fit. So a couple of years ago, our denomination voted to rephrase and reframe our bylaws. And this is really relevant to what we're talking about today. We voted to rewrite Article 2 of our bylaws, which revised our purposes and principles. And one of the changes that occurred with that was a revision of what we've always called our 6 sources. So it used to be that we had this list of 6 sources of Unitarian Universalism. And the list included this: direct experiences of transcending mystery and wonder, words and deeds of prophetic people, Jewish and Christian traditions, science, humanist teachings, and earth-based teachings. And here's what happened. People started saying, but I want to be on the list too. So people who are Buddhists started saying, you need to include Buddhists in the list. And people who are Jewish, or people who are Muslim started saying, we need to include Islam on the list. So the UUA said, we're going to have too big of a list. We need to figure out a different way to say this. Okay? So I'm going to read to you the new version about this in our denominational bylaws. Section C 2.3, Inspirations. Direct experiences of transcending mystery and wonder, I'm going to say parentheses mysticism, are primary sources of Unitarian Universalist inspiration. These experiences open our hearts, renew our spirits, and transform our lives. We draw upon and are inspired by sacred, secular, and scientific understanding that help us make meaning and live into our values. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which these sources were created and are currently practiced. Grateful for the experiences that move us, aware of the religious ancestries we inherit, and enlivened by the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. So, I think this new framing of our sources of inspiration gives us some guidance for the challenge of being truly pluralistic as a community. Right? A place where atheists and mystics and Christians and Jews and Muslims and others can learn and be supported and grow and have fellowship together. This new framing invites us to be, quote, enlivened by the diversity which enriches our faith. Enlivened. And it calls us to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. It seems to me that that's the crux of the issue. It's asking us to be students, not defenders. Whether one philosophical position has been, in the front or at the back at any given point in our tradition is really not the point. I think the point is that we are committed to connecting and being in relationship and listening to one another regardless of where we stand on those theological issues. We are being asked as we hear it often in our welcome and in our sort of taglines for this congregation, we are being asked to have open minds and open hearts, right? You do not have to become a mystic at Westside just because more people here are now mystical. Any more than I had to become an atheist when I came here 12 years ago. We do, though, need to act in good faith in one another. You don't have to put faith in the same things I put faith in, but we can put faith in one another. We can avoid preemptive judgments of someone simply because they think about or understand the world differently. We can be open to hear what matters to another person because they're part of our community, not because their beliefs confirm our own. Okay? So one of the phrases I most often heard for many years in Unitarian Universalism was, I want to be with people of like mind. Well, I don't, because I won't grow. If I'm never exposed to anything new, I'm not going to grow. I want to be with people of like heart, whose hearts are committed to building connection and communion with one another, whose hearts are committed to building love in the world, whose hearts and lives are devoted to creating health and well-being and equity and justice. But I know that I don't know enough to have that figured out, so I want to hear different perspectives than my own, because I need to learn some things. We need to ask curious questions rather than making snap decisions or criticisms of one another, regardless of which theological perspective we have. I will say very clearly and honestly, I have heard people who are not theists, who are atheists here and in other places, say people of faith are idiots. How could they believe something that stupid? What an intellectual shortcut. And I have heard mystics say, how could people be so blind to not see the divine in everything in the world? How stupid do you have to be to ignore God? Those are not the kinds of things we want to say, regardless of where we are theologically. Instead, we want to say, everybody who knows me knows what word we're supposed to say next. Fascinating. 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 That's interesting. Let's talk about that. Fascinating. Culture is constantly changing. How we understand and interpret and try to describe all of this that we will never understand and describe all of, that's constantly changing. But there's something that's not changing. The human need for respect, for connection, for growth, for learning. Those don't ever change. I believe that Unitarian Universalism is a place where that's what we prioritize. The ability to learn and grow and share together, to be curious, to prioritize love over being right. So if we wish to create a community that is resilient and welcoming, that counters our current world trend toward divisiveness and polarization, these are some things I think we need to practice. Let us walk, as Peter Mayer suggests in that song, Holy Now, with the reverent air, in awe and respect for the inherent holiness, worthiness of each life, of each person, and of each perspective that we encounter. That is sacred work, and may we do it with open hearts and open minds. May it be so. So one of the ways we do this here is we commit to connecting with our neighbors. Neighbors in the community who are different than us, neighbors in the community who are living different experiences than we are. Our current justice and generosity, I almost did it too, Ellen. Our current justice and generosity partner is Keep the Tennessee River Beautiful. And you can see here we have a QR code. Every quarter, Westside commits to supporting one local community agency that is doing work in the world to make this world a healthier, more whole, more sustainable, more loving place. So right now we're supporting Keep the Tennessee River Beautiful. And you can contribute to them using the QR code. We have already committed a certain amount of financial support for them. And hopefully in a few weeks we're going to be having a service talking about them. But you can support them directly, or you can support them through this congregation. You can also support the congregation, which in turn then supports our partners. I want to tell you about a special other new justice and generosity option that you have, and that is in the foyer. You will find a new little display of handmade crafts made by some of the kids connected with this congregation. There's a display of handmade crafts that you can purchase. They're small, beautiful little things, and all those funds are going to be going to AKIN, Allies of Knoxville's Immigrant Neighbors. And that was an initiative just started by one family here. They just said, we want to do this. We want to do this. And the kids and some of their friends started, and they were doing that. Some of you who were here for one of our fairs that we held at the church, they had some things then. And we've just established something in the foyer where you can pick up little things. And that money will go directly to support our immigrant community here in Knoxville. Okay? And I can tell you that many of those people in that community do not share some of our theological beliefs, but they're still our community. So I encourage you in whatever way works for you to find ways to live your values in the world, to embody them. So one of the ways we embody this commitment to connection is by physically connecting. I will repeat as I invite you to stand. I invite you to stand. You do not have to stand. You're not going to get kicked out if you don't stand. I invite you to hold hands if you feel so inclined, and you're not going to get asked to leave if you don't hold hands. Because you can hold your own hands, and that is perfectly okay. But with our bodies each week, we physically do this to demonstrate that our commitment is to building bridges and connections in a world where division and polarization have become the order of the day. So go out into your day, into the world that so desperately needs this, to be the ones who say, fascinating. Fascinating. Could you tell me more about that? Help me understand. Let me be an instrument of curiosity and connection. Go do that in a spirit of peace and passion, celebrating yourself and all that is possible in this world. May it be so.